Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you all are doing well. And today I'm wearing green for a very special reason because today we have to talk about the Lanterns trailer that had so much lack of green in it. But I just had some thoughts. I already watched the trailer, so I'm not going to pretend to react to a trailer that I've already seen before. And so mainly I just kind of want to talk about it and I want to bring up some of the thoughts that I had about the trailer itself. And so without further ado, let's get into it. One of the things I was thinking about when it comes to making anything, creating anything, to me, it is a conversation between the creator and the audience, the people that are going to partake into this thing that you've created, right? It is a conversation between you two, and it is a sort of agreement between you two. And there is a sense of trust that you ask of the audience. And we have to be able to trust you. And as society and as, we are growing, when it comes to the landscape of franchises and these stories being used to make financial gain, we are learning that we don't always completely trust. And I don't completely trust what they have promised us. And so that's the question of, well, what promises, did they make? Which ones are important? What promises you make, they are important. And what are they? And so the current promises that they have made for us is that this show is going to be like True Detective and that there is a sense of maturity to it. And I don't know if that's necessarily a great thing on the maturity part. I do actually like the True Detective aspect of it. I know there's going to be some people that are going to be upset with that, but to me, as long as you don't just stay there, I'm cool starting off with a True Detective approach where the scales get higher and higher and higher. I have thought of a story similar that kind of takes place in an idea that would be kind of like True Detective. But then as you follow along in the story, my idea would get a little darker and darker until it became kind of like this crazy, like horror kind of film. It'd be a completely different thing than something like what True Detective was. But if if Lanterns was to do True Detective, but then scale it to where it starts to become this, space epic and starts off low level, I wouldn't really have a problem with that. The question is, do I have the trust to know that they're going to do that? And to be honest, I don't necessarily have the trust. And I would maybe have more of a trust if Peacemaker Season 2 would have ended on a higher note than what it did. If James Gunn would have made the promises that he should have made in that show, right? There should have been some more from that show that he gave us. He didn't give us, he gave us what he wanted to give us, which is fine, but that's not necessarily what the audience totally wanted. And I think he could have gave us everything that he wanted as long as he would have fulfilled those promises that the audience asked for. And I don't necessarily believe that we're going to get those things that the audience is asking for when it comes to something like the Lanterns, okay? Like Green Lanterns. And so there is a question of who is this show for? Is it for the diehard comic book fan? It could be. I hope it is. I don't know. Is this for, younger audiences? It's clearly not. It's clearly not. And do I expect this show to be at a level appropriate for children at the level of Superman? Not necessarily, but I do think it should have been closer. I do think it should have been closer. Maybe, yeah, a little darker. You're dealing with scary, probably aliens, hopefully. So, yeah, there's an aspect of this that would probably be a little darker. But, are we going to need to have the F-bomb said a gazillion times? I know that the actor that plays Guy Gardner, Nathan Fillion, he had said that he says way more F-bombs in this show than anything like Superman. It's going to be like he's a completely different character. And so they are making that choice with a character that should probably be, I wouldn't necessarily say for all ages, but should definitely be from like, I think a PG-13 rating, even if it's a stronger PG-13 rating, I do think that should have been the goal. That should have been the goal. Is there going to be nudity in this show? Is there going to be a bunch of this other stuff in this show? Because that is going to cut out the younger people from being able to watch the show. And I do think this should be a show that at least some older, more mature kids should be able to watch. Now, some of you will argue, well, who cares, blah, blah, blah. There's plenty of, parents who will let their kids watch this. And sure, yes. But there's a plenty of parents who will not. And I think those are probably some of the better parents. So, should you have tried to make this a little different in certain aspects? I think you could have. There's certain words you could change. Instead of using the F-bomb, you could have used different words that illustrated the same point. I also kind of wonder, if you have Guy Gardner using certain vocabulary in one type of movie, and then when he comes into the show and he has a different kind of vocabulary, is there going to be some confusion with the character in future projects, or any of these characters in future projects, when they may use a different word or a different term than they would use in the shows? That is something to think about. It's something that I have concerns with, because there is an idea of lifting these characters up. And then do I trust that? Is it just going to stay with language? We all know that Tom King is a part of this show, I don't need my Martian Manhunter in the DC universe having a flame, I'm trying to use choice words here, but a flame fetish. I don't need that. I don't need that in my DC universe, okay? I don't care for none of that crap, okay? So, I really do think the DC universe, I like the aspect that there's different tones, different shifts, and all these things. But I do think with certain characters, they really need to pinpoint this character needs to, if it's their headline thing, then they need to fit this kind of maturity level. And I think that's fair to ask of a big studio that's making millions and millions and millions of dollars off of what we enjoy and what we watch. That's just me. Hot take. I know. Hot take. But besides those two things, we're not really promised anything else. We know that there's going to be powers, but even the powers, which I'm going to get into in a little bit, I have some criticisms for, but we don't know the amount of action that's going to be in this show. We know there's going to be some explosion that kind of happens, some almost EMP kind of blast from the trailer, but we don't really know much else. So that's all we can go on. That's the promises they have given us. So what are the criticisms that I have from watching this? The suit, funny enough, I have issues with it, but to me, the issues have more to do with the color palette than they have to do with the actual suit itself. I've even seen someone trying to mock it, and they actually put the suit over Kyle Chandler. And to be honest, I still think it actually kind of looks good. I still want to see him with a domino mask. That's just me personally. But to me, it does look good to an extent when they imagine it on the actor. But the brown, I have a reason that I could be okay with it, and it's going to get into the lack of color, but that the show just has in itself, period. But I am not happy with the brown. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the brown necessarily. Will it be fine? Will I survive? Sure, but I'm not happy with the brown. And there's one way they can make it work, and I'll get into that in just a second. But a lot of people are not happy with the suit, and I totally get that. But for me, I'm okay with it to an extent, but I'm really not happy with the brown. And so let's get into the color, right? I'm talking about the brown color on the suit. Let's get into the color as a whole when it comes to the trailer that we watched. Is it more bland colors? Yes. Could that be a problem? Yes. This is probably my slightest actual criticism, because when I think of it, when you are finally using the Green Lantern powers, those bright colors, hopefully, those bright colors that we're going to see, especially if it's not just the Green Lanterns, if it's other lanterns, then we may have a really cool feast, and it would visually look really cool if the Green Lantern powers are so bright. You do kind of want the color palette of everything else to kind of go down. It's the same thing when the Superman movie came out. Superman is wearing his red, blue, and yellow, but everybody else is wearing like very bland colors, right? Because you want to make Superman look really good, especially on film and in front of the camera. You want him to look really fantastic. And so, illuminating Superman is, the way to do that is by kind of blanding out everything else. Now, are they actually going to do that? Are we actually going to see John Stewart in a Green Lantern suit? I don't know. Are we going to see Hal Jordan in his actual Green Lantern suit? I think so, but I don't know. I would hope so, right? And when we see them use their powers, is it going to be these bright colors? Are they going to even make that bland? Now, that's going to be really disappointing, and that's where they're going to really mess up when it comes to this show. And so they have till August. I really hope that they put a little aura, put a little shine, put a little color, especially when it comes to them using their abilities, which this is probably my biggest actual criticism from the show, or from the trailer. When Hal Jordan is flying, they did not give him any sort of aura. Now, I kind of ignored it when Superman came out. It's one of those things you wish you could see, and the more I think of it, the cooler that would have looked for Guy Gardner if he would have had a little bit of an aura around him as he was flying around. Even if it's just a little bit. And I get maybe there's a VFX aspect of that, a cost of that they don't want to do. But we've seen some really cool VFX in the past when it deals with color. And the color is super important, right? The color of them is super important. You understand why lightsabers are so important in Star Wars. This is no different. The color is important, and having a sense of aura around the characters, have a green glow around them when they're using their powers, I think is super important. I actually care about that more than I care about them having costumes versus them making their own costume. I care about that more than a lot of things when it comes to this show. And there should have been no reason why when Hal Jordan's flying, there wasn't a green glow. Now, if they want to argue that maybe like a normal type of flying isn't necessarily needed to have a green glow, then I'll deal with it. Fine. But the faster he goes, the faster he flies, there's reasons for the glow to happen because it should be like a shield barrier for the character. So I do hope that when we get into the action scenes, some of the fight scenes in the show, that we do have moments where the green glow happens. And I do hope where all that brown is on the armor, a lot can be forgiven if in those moments where he's in battle and he's wearing his suit, if those brown areas get a green glow over it from him using his lantern abilities. Like those are the places where he would put his armor, right? His armor that he makes from his ring. That would be really cool. That would really, really, really cool. And a lot can be forgiven if you do something interesting like that. But let's talk about constructs real quick, because that would fit as a construct, right? We didn't see any constructs. And I do think the next trailer, you've teased the thing with the car multiple times. When the thing that we had that was kind of teasing, like just the different shows that were going to come on HBO Max, they teased that car scene where Hal Jordan jumps out. And they opened up the trailer with that again. The next trailer they do, I understand this is probably more of a teaser, but the next trailer they have to have us see what happened with Jon Stewart. You might as well just show it, because there's such a criticism and there's such a negativity about this show right now that if you don't show how Jon Stewart made it out of that scene, and hopefully using the ring, you're not winning anybody over. You got to show some constructs. That's what's so cool about Green Lanterns, because all the Green Lanterns are going to use constructs differently. They're going to have a different way of using their constructs. And so, the constructs are extremely important. They're extremely important. And I want to see some constructs. We don't need to see a ton of them. We want to keep a lot of surprises for the show. But that's something you've teased so much now that I think it makes sense to do that. Also, if there's a gunfire fight between like some normal human-looking soldiers and the Lanterns, I don't see why you couldn't maybe show a little bit of action scene there to give a little bit of pop for the audience. And the fact that there was no constructs is definitely a negative thing, but it is a teaser, so trying to be fair with that. I think less people would be thinking about constructs and them making constructs if there would have been a little bit more aura, especially in the scene where Hal Jordan was flying. I think a lot more would have been forgiven. But we live in a day where the audience doesn't trust the people making the content. And so making the stories, right? So that was still kind of leaned into a negative. But again, a slider won me understanding it's a teaser, but you better show a construct in the next trailer for me to be happy. Now, we kind of hit on this earlier, but the maturity. To me, this should be the type of show that a father and son could watch together. And maybe the son isn't that into superheroes, and this is like the outlet for him to get into it. And we had this conversation just a little while ago, but, there's going to be some people that are going to write in the comments, well, parents let their kids watch stuff all the time. And yes, there is parents that will let their kids watch stuff all the time. But I know many parents, many parents who will not let their kids watch something like this because of the language. Specifically the language. And we haven't even talked about if there's going to be nudity in this show. We haven't talked about if there's going to be sex scenes in this show. But just from the language, and I have to admit, from someone who understands Peacemaker is a more mature show and probably needs to be a mature show. Peacemaker is DC's true version of like what Deadpool is. Okay, he's not fourth wall breaking, but I guess he can be, but he is their Deadpool. He is. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with making that character what it is. But does everything have to be that? Does everything outside of Superman, does everything outside of the movies have to be that? Is there a show that can fit within the DC universe that the kids can watch, that the kids can enjoy? I like the aspect that there's a middle ground when it comes to the movies and shows. I respect the fact that there's a maturity level there, but there was a maturity level with the Batman animated series, and kids could still watch that and enjoy it. Now, I'm not talking about 5-year-olds watching this show. I'm not talking about 6-year-olds watching this show. My sister, even with the lack of language, would not let my niece, who's 10 years old, watch this show, probably because when the aliens and stuff happen, it would probably scare her. But you can let a lot slide if there's not constant F-bombs, if there's not concerns that there's going to be nudity or extreme sex in a show that maybe an older kid who's more mature can handle. Especially a preteen to teenage kid could handle, that a responsible adult would allow their kid to watch. And can we have a show that fits that middle ground? Can we have a show that we could have on the TV that we don't necessarily have to be uber concerned what's going to pop up in front of our kids? Can we have that? And to me, that is a little bit of a criticism, because to me, your main 7 characters should fit in such a way that at least the majority of the audience can enjoy it. Maybe not super young kids. I get that. But your Batman, your Superman, your Green Lantern, your Wonder Woman, your Aquaman, your Flash. The rating should fit in such a range that the majority of people can enjoy it. And even if it's an HBO show, you can still deal with mature themes. You can still deal with mature ideas. You can still deal with tons of action, all those things you want in a show. You maybe would have even got a bigger budget if you would have done that. And I will say that that's leaning towards more of a concern for me, because I feel like we don't have a middle ground. We either have things that are super kiddie, like almost too kiddie, to the point of things being a little way too mature. I would like to have a middle ground. I think Lanterns could have been a little bit more of a middle ground than it seems it's going to be in the trailer. Okay. Hey guys, I do want to add this one quick thing. I'm editing this into the video. I was also thinking about one of the critiques I had, which was the element of Hal Jordan basically confirming that he doesn't really have a conversation with any of the other Lanterns because they're all aliens. It kind of goes against what the ring is supposed to do for them and the ability, some of the abilities that the rings have. I do hope that leads into another joke or another comment where he does talk to some of them, and maybe him just being kind of a jerk or kind of playful with John Stewart in that moment. I do hope they make that change. I hope that there's more to that scene than just that. I hope at least he a little illustrates that he does talk to some of them. But that's just me, because that can help broaden the DC universe. And the alternative is that it's shrinking the DC universe. And I think that's negative. I don't like the fact that Hal Jordan doesn't have a relationship with Kilowog. That's a negative to me. So anyway, that's my little quick comment. Back to where we were. So what can they do next time? And we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I do think, give us color, give us aura, right? Show us them using the powers at least a little bit. Show us what that color is going to look like, right? Give us aura. When Hal Jordan's flying, I don't care if they didn't put it in Guy Gardner's Superman or Guy Gardner in the Superman movie. Put it in the new trailer and put it in the show. When Green Lanterns fly, they should have a little bit of an aura around them. Like, I don't believe that when it comes to VFX, right? I feel like this is probably one of the cheapest things they could do that would make it look way cooler and way more interesting. And would separate them from other characters who can fly and other characters who can do different things. Give us the aura. Give us the aura. It's not much to ask. I'd say show powers in action, right? If there's a firefight, if there's something you can do without teasing or spoiling what the actual show's about, and you can show a little bit of firefight between some of the soldiers and other things, I would say do that. Show a construct, some kind, during that scene. Show us something. Show us, like I said, the scene where the car is flying down with John Stewart. Show that. And show Hal in the suit. You might as well show it in the suit. Because maybe if he looks really cool in the suit, I think that'd be a great place to show the constructs. If you do have constructs over where the brown parts are, that would be a good place to show. Because that is such a negative point to so many people on X and on social media as a whole. That's such a negative point to people right now that I think it'd be really wise to do it. And I don't think you need to spoil the show. I don't think you need to spoil who the bad guys are. But I do think you need to tease something greater. I do think that. You need to... If it wasn't for Hal flying and mentioning of aliens, you really wouldn't know very much about what this show... You wouldn't even know that it has anything to do with aliens, really, right? Or anything at all. And so teasing something greater, I think, would be a good idea, and teasing that something greater is out there. We know Sinestro's in the show. They publicly announced the actor who's playing Sinestro. And so unless he looks like a normal human being and he doesn't have no green skin, show the man with green skin. You don't have to show anything else, but show the green skin, or the green skin, pink skin, sorry, pink skin. Show that pink skin on that villain and let us see what Sinestro looks like. Give us something that kind of teases that there's something greater than just this True Detective feel that it has. And the last thing I'm concerned with, and this is, those are the things they can do to make things better. I have to admit that there is a bias towards me, and I think a lot of the audience right now, about who is over this show. Now, Chris Mundy is probably the one that I'm the most excited about that he's involved with this show, but because I did love Ozark, but I do not trust Tom King. I do not necessarily trust Damon Lindelof. I maybe liked The Watchmen more than a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there that maybe didn't. I found the parts that I did like of Watchmen. I'm a more optimistic guy, okay? So even if I have criticisms of something, I still had elements of that Watchmen series that I did enjoy. But I don't trust them. And there is a level of distrust that I think I'm feeling, and I'm seeing a lot of the audience is feeling towards what's going to actually be in this show and how they view this show. Damon Lindelof already came out and said the reason they called it Lanterns is because they thought Green Lanterns was stupid. That's a negative for someone like me. Now, I was positive at first because I thought, okay, Lanterns means, okay, it's going to have a broader scope. If you don't have a broader scope, people are going to be extremely disappointed. There's also this theme where I have noticed since the very beginning when James Gunn has been kind of over this, that every single season of every single IP that we've done, right? We have Creature Commandos, Superman, all these things. And Superman had the least amount, but it still had some preachy politics in it that maybe I even agree to some extent with. But it was still present, and James Gunn can act like it wasn't there, whatever. It was. There was elements there. He was making a point about real world issues, and we even know that based off who he was originally going to get anyway, to play that one of the parts of Bolivia's leader, right? And so there's elements there. Creature Commandos had elements of that, right? Definitely targeting like incels or whatever. Then, we have the whole Nazi thing with Peacemaker. And supposedly there is concerns, and I don't want to spoil anything, so if you don't want to hear this, move on, but there's concerns that supposedly the big villain of this thing, despite maybe having aspects of it to do with aliens, that one of the big villains of this series is going to be the alt-right. And some of that stuff's starting to get very eye-rolly. Even like Earth X, there's interesting things you can do with Earth X, but the way that they're handling some of this stuff is starting to become very eye-rolly. And if every thing that you make has something to do with the political landscape that we are in, and is specifically attacking one side of that political landscape, when the reality is a lot of these writers don't necessarily fully even know what they're talking about when it comes to these things anyway, which makes it a little worse. It kind of feels like you have nothing else to say. If it's philosophical, if it's something deeper, I like when there's a story that has a message in it. But if every single thing you do just seems to target one central idea all the time and that's it, that's going to come off as not only annoying anymore, not only dangerous anymore because of the landscape that we're in, because of violence and all those things that we deal with every day. It's just going to become kind of boring. And that's not something I want to get too much into in this channel, but it is a reality that we're getting just thrown at constantly when it comes to these shows. And I just do have a concern about it. It's not too strong, but any of these writers dealing with the American heartland, a mystery in the American heartland, my radars go off about what the direction of the show is going to lean into, and I see a lot of eye rolling in my future. And I hope that I'm wrong on that, but we will have to see. So those are some of the critiques. I have some positives. I do like Hal and John together. Do I wish maybe they were closer to the age? Maybe, but I like Kyle Chandler. I think Kyle Chandler is going to be a great Hal Jordan if he's given the right material. I think that Aaron Pierre is going to be a great Jon Stewart. I know some people have issues with that, but to me, he looks like the guy that I watched when I was watching Cartoon Network as a kid. So that might be a little bit of my bias, but I think he's going to be a great Jon Stewart. And we need someone like him who is growing his stardom to take a role like that. I do think it'll be a greater good than bad, and I do think he's going to be a great Jon Stewart. And so those are positives I have. I do think those two actors work really well together. Is the material going to justify its existence? We'll have to see to find out. But guys, let me know what you think about the show. Are you concerned? Are you worried? Do you have critiques? Do you have all these different things? Are you having positives? Let me know some positives if you have some positive things about the show. Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, I hope you're having a good one. Peace.